back to the BunnyCast. We're continuing our discussion of the Watchmen. Just as a reminder, this is going to be the spoilerific Watchmen discussion. So,
Man, it felt like we were trapped in that break for about a week or so. Oh, that was weird.
Man, maybe it was the time dilation effect.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Tachyons, don't you know?
And we
Yes.
and we play the theme to Doctor Who. Whichever one you want to pick, go for it.
Okay, so
I'll just reverse the polarity.
the
Anyway,
for those who are listening and don't want to go pick up the book and don't want to go see the movie, the Watchmen is about it's a universe related to some DC properties that DC bought in the early to mid '80s, and basically they wanted a big story arc to talk about these characters, but when the person who wrote the original script for it presented it to DC, they said, "Well, this is nice, but we will never ever be able to use these characters again." So they said that they decided that since it was such a good story, that they were going to create a bunch of new characters to go in place of the characters that were originally created for this wonderful story. And in my opinion,
if you use your mind, you can actually figure out which characters are supposed to be which.
yes, in retrospect, it's actually kind of obvious, but it's kind of surprising when you first find that out. But the characters are really, really well conceived, partially because they're based on some other characters, but they're fleshed out in their own unique ways.
Coffee shop.
Anyways, the story starts off with one of these superheroes being killed in his own apartment.
The comedian.
Yes, the comedian. And the iconic image of this tilted smiley face with the drop of blood comes from that scene where he's killed and the drop of blood drips onto his badge. That's the comedian's signature badge, is the smiley face. And he's thrown out of a window and dies on the pavement. One of his former teammates...
As you do.
Indeed. One of his former teammates begins to investigate. This teammate is Rorschach. Rorschach. To give you a good idea of what Rorschach's character is, think Batman, but not afraid of taking a life. I mean, he's
with a deeper voice than Batman actually has.
He's that badass. And his mask is really cool. It kind of makes you wish you had a mask like that in real life.
Well, you can if you've got a couple of $1 million to spend.
Which begs the
Or you
question.
happen to work in a dress shop which has that particular material. Spoiler!
Yeah. So, in any case, through the investigation, you actually find out the history of the Watchmen and the history of this world, which is different from our
Hang on a
world.
second, guys.
While he's doing that, I'll continue to recap, which is different from our world in that the arrival, or first off, the arrival on the crime-fighting scene of so-called maskers
In the 20s.
in the 20s, thank you, is literally changed the course of history in terms of certain characters doing certain things, certain people doing certain things, including it's hinted at that the comedian was actually JFK's assassin.
Well, that's actually shown in the movie.
Yeah.
One little point is the little changes is that one of the things is you don't have superheroes because the fact they've got masked people out there, so superhero comics and that don't exist because who wants to read them when you can watch them in real life?
Yeah, just turn on the news.
Yeah, and they
What are we talking about?
Still recapping.
Still doing history. Yeah, and the reason why they've got the so-called vigilante heroes are out is because the criminals got a bit more violent than what they did in real life, and the cops, some of the cops at least, decided they wanted to go outside the law and do things which they knew to bring justice to these people that wouldn't have saw reason otherwise.
Yeah. And which if we move forward into the 40s, late 40s, early 50s, that brings us to the arrival of the first actual Superman of this particular universe.
50s, late 50s, 60s.
Late 50s? Okay, I thought it was early 50s. Anyways.
Yeah, because they're doing experiments with radiation.
Well, they were doing
Hence
experiments
Dr.
with
Manhattan.
radiation in the 30s. Yes.
Not the type that brought him about.
Yeah, true. Anyways, Dr. Manhattan was, we'll say, created in the late 50s due to an accident. One of the physicists at the particular government facility was trapped in a chamber which literally ripped him apart atom by atom, if not on an even more quantum scale. And,
Intrinsic fields.
Yeah. Which, by the way, is a totally... It's a pseudoscientific name. There's no such thing as the intrinsic field. Anyway,
Really?
Really?
I did not know. The more you know.
So they, so this guy, somehow his consciousness remains, and due to his past as a watchmaker, he's able to literally reassemble his body, and in the process becomes a master of space and time.
Yeah, there's a few other things going on that sort of help with that. That sort of helps his mindset.
True. But, we're trying to keep this simple, Squato, which says, that it's gone on this long. It tells you a lot about how complex this story is. So with the arrival of Dr. Manhattan, it literally changes the complete landscape of the world. Aeronautics takes a different direction so that airships are the norm instead of airplanes.
Nuclear deterrence.
Nuclear deterrents are vastly escalated because it's thought that might be the only thing that will stop Dr. Manhattan. But Dr. Manhattan himself is a literal, physical, moving weapon, and he single-handedly wins the Vietnam conflict for the United States.
Making it the 51st state.
Yes. And that sweeping victory at the hands of Dr. Manhattan would not have happened if Richard Nixon had not requested that Dr. Manhattan go to Vietnam, which the two preceding presidents, including Kennedy, were unwilling to do. They didn't want to ask Dr. Manhattan to become part of the Vietnam conflict.
And it's kind of implied because they didn't want to antagonize the Russians too much.
Well, since the victory was just so final, term limits were eliminated for U.S. presidents, and Nixon was reelected 5 times. So he's still president.
Well, he's on his 5th term, not elected 5 times. Yeah. Well, Tom, there's 5th term in the story.
Yeah, 5th term in the storyline. So he's still in power in 1985 when this story takes place. During the 1960s, instead of huge anti-Vietnam, anti-war protests, there's anti-massacre protests, finally culminating in the Keene Act, which basically outlaw all vigilante superheroes.
Largely because you don't need them when you've got a god on your side.
Not necessarily. It was mostly due to public hysteria, and
that was one of the reasons that was kind of put in there is the fact that people he basically meant that they look redundant next to him, considering how well he could just get rid of crime. Oh, look, I give you cancer.
Well, actually, I don't think it was ever actually stated or ever actually proved that he gave anyone cancer directly, although it was fingers were certainly pointed in his direction.
Movie said none of that cancer stuff ever actually happened, so I'm going off that.
Yeah. So moving on, it's years later, and there's no more mass superheroes that are operating legally, with exceptions such as Rorschach, who just continued going even after the Keene Act was passed.
Yeah, he's been on the
And
run for about 10
the
years
government
as a
sanctified
comedian.
ones as well.
Yeah, which include the comedian and Dr. Manhattan and maybe a couple others, but they don't really go into huge amounts of detail about that. But basically...
And, well, they do. The only details they seem to imply is they're not working in the US, they're working elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's more like the massacres become an extension of the CIA than anything else. And
Yeah.
Yeah, we all know the rumors that the CIA is doing stuff for the United States that wouldn't be done by any other agency.
No.
In any case, Rorschach believes that somebody is trying to kill the maskers, and so he approaches all of his old colleagues, one of whom is Night Owl, who lets their old buddy Ozymandias know that somebody's trying to kill maskers. Well,
Ozymandias.
whatever. It's a ridiculously complex name, but assigned to an incredibly pompous idiot.
My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look at my mighty works, you and despair. That's not the exact quote, but more or less.
It's pretty close. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, including all the ers and ums as well. Sorry, Squato.
So,
I'll get you back, don't you worry.
trying to shorten this up a lot, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, but you find out that Ozymandias is actually the guy who orchestrated the killing the cancers that were blamed on Dr. Manhattan, which alienated him and caused him to leave. He's the one that has been manipulating world events so that it brings everybody closer to nuclear annihilation. He's the one that he actually killed the comedian. He framed Rorschach for the death of one of the Watchmen's old bad guys.
Moloch the Magnificent.
Yes. He was behind all of it, and he tried to take out the Watchmen one by one, but they uncovered his plot, but not before he had... and I love this. I love how he does this. His plan is to cause deaths of a comparatively massive scale to get everybody on the planet to stop trying to kill each other.
Comparative small scale.
No, comparatively massive, because nobody's killed that many people all at once before.
It's massive, but in comparison to what might happen with a full-on war,
Yeah.
nuclear war.
Well, yeah, the quote, you're killing millions to save billions. You can tell how much respect I have for this idiot.
He's also a vegetarian.
Which explains so much.
Hitler was also a vegetarian. Sorry, I
He also had
took it
one
there.
ball.
So there's when Rorschach says, "We're not going to let you get away with this," and Ozymandias, and probably the only thing he says that's smart is, "What do you think I am? Some comic book villain? I did it 30 minutes ago." And of course they show New York being just wiped out,
That was in the book. In the movie, it's New York and various other cities around the world.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the differences between the book and the movie in a minute. But when the Watchmen are fighting him, including Dr. Manhattan, who's come back from Mars by this point, Dr. Manhattan is about to capture Ozymandias when Ozymandias turns on all the monitors in his little secret Arctic lair, and you see Nixon and all the world leaders saying, we're going to set aside our differences to focus on facing this threat that confronts us all, and blah, 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 blah. And everybody's all, oh, wow, it is peace through superior firepower. Or, basically they're hooked on this notion that the world is now all completely peaceful and everybody's going to live together in harmony because there's this big outside threat. And so,
Which was a squid monster that it appears to have effed the world over with tentacle rape of a different nature.
that's the comic. And again, we'll get into the differences. So, Dr. Manhattan, whose regular name is John, he says, oh, since this world is now at peace, I'm going to go to another galaxy and create life there. And
Bye.
But when Rorschach threatens to reveal everything to the press, Dr. Manhattan, who doesn't want this fragile peace to be disturbed, does Ozymandias a favor and kills Rorschach in a very nasty way, but it was really well portrayed in the movie. In any case, Dr. Manhattan then departs for another galaxy, and Night Owl, who was longtime partner of Rorschach, just attacks Ozymandias as being the perpetrator of all this. And, excuse me, he says, and this is, in my opinion, the best summation of just how stupid Ozymandias' whole plan was. He says, we were supposed to save mankind, but you perverted it, you mutilated humanity. And that is the best way I could possibly think of encapsulating this idea of tricking the world into being at peace.
Wow, so Night Owl actually has a spine in the movie.
Yeah.
In the comic book, he just kind of gives up. Just,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, this sounds like a good plan. I'm going to go along with it.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that, and which is going to segue us nicely into the differences between the movie and the comic. In my opinion, and you feel free to debate me on this, the movie...
You're wrong.
Shut up. The movie is a much more clean plot in that, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that works as a gimmick in comics where you can throw in, say, a faked alien invasion, and the reader of a comic is not going to blink or think twice about it. But your regular moviegoer of today is going to say, why bother faking a alien invasion? There's literally, I mean, the way they handled it in the movie by making where Ozymandias made Dr. Manhattan the big threat and Dr. Manhattan playing along makes it's so much cleaner. There's no need to do all sorts of genetic rebuilding. There's no need to have this silly plot line about broadcasting death and destruction to all the psychics and telepaths of the world.
Well, it's meant to be the 80s, and just look what 80s fashion was like, so anything could be believable in that type of scenario.
But, I mean, the point is that the cleaned up plot of the movie was, in my opinion, a better way of doing the exact same thing. In other words, while it remained very, very loyal to the book, it took out some stuff that was, in my opinion, frankly unnecessary. Having massive amounts of destruction and death being attributed to Dr. Manhattan's energy explosions is, in my opinion, better than having a gigantic tentacle creature whose teleportation into the middle of New York City somehow managed to wipe out all these people. which, in my opinion, didn't really make a lot of sense. Because if there was going to be a big, gigantic teleporting octopus that showed up on a planet from somewhere, anybody with half a brain would say, big, gigantic teleporting octopus alien. You'd think they would have perfected the technology before they tried to teleport in.
True.
So, in my opinion, the Ozymandias' plot in the comic was a lot weaker because it was so much easier to pick apart than a very simple, oh, we've got this godlike being watching us from possibly Mars or somewhere. We can't really tell where he is, and we can't fight him, we can't do anything to him, but he's going to kill us if we're not nice to each other. That makes a lot more sense. Other differences. I was kind of... I wouldn't say I was disappointed because I expected it, but it was kind of a bummer that some of the smaller plots about the supporting characters could not have been shown more.
Well, actually, I've got to jump in with the point here. One little point about why they did the change beforehand between the squid thing and what they did, and that is because in the original they felt that would just saying New York littered with bodies everywhere was kind of not the best image after 9/11.
Well, I wanted to talk about the 9/11 parallels in a minute, but
yeah, but with the other stuff that was filmed, for instance, they recorded there's a few things they've done. They recorded the stuff with the extra characters. A lot of them you just got to see doing walk-ins in the film, and they even did make a DVD it's going to be released of the Black Freighter. Apparently, they're going to put that all together when they do the big DVD version.
Good. Which reminds me, I've got to...
But it could be getting closer. The movie itself was was just under 3 hours long. The DVD version could be going nearer to 5.
Yeah. If this was going to be made for TV, it would be a mini series that lasted a month.
Yeah, that's what. Oh Christ, who was it? The one that was earmarked to direct it? Terry Gilliam. It's Terry Gilliam was saying that he was earmarked to actually direct it, and that was basically how he described it, saying that it would have worked better as if it was a TV movie or a miniseries.
Which reminds me, if it's a limited time offer, but if you buy an IMAX ticket through Fandango for the IMAX Watchmen experience, you get a free iTunes download of some Black Freighter content. And I haven't downloaded my copy yet, so I can't give you a review of it. But just a heads up for those of you who are interested in that particular little bonus. So,
although it's meant to be better, as far as I understand, than Watchmen: The End Is Nigh, which is the video game.
Yeah, I never expect video games based on movie franchises to do any good.
Including the Rorschach minigame where you have to guess what his Rorschach blotch patterns are supposed to be.
Butterfly. A pretty flower.
Some clouds. Anyways. But yeah, some of the supporting characters, like the cops that are investigating the murder of the comedian and the psychiatrist, and I really liked how in the book it all culminated with all these tiny little plot lines following all these bit characters.
All ending up on that crossroads street.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden it's all wiped out by this teleportation after effect that kills a whole ton of people.
Yeah, and the last thing you see is the news vendor hugging that kid who's been hanging around his newsstand for a bit.
They did retain that little element, at least, in the movie.
Let's see, other changes that come to mind. The fight scene between Ozymandias and the gunman that he hired to have himself killed, but of course it was just going to be a show thing. A little bit different, but I think they pulled off the difference as well, because the way it was done in the comic was kind of weak.
One little thing I found this out a bit later is in that scene, the guy that gets shot in the head and dies, it's meant to actually be a lookalike for the Chrysler.
Yeah,
the guy was, yeah. I didn't actually know that was a person until later.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, he used to be, during the 80s, he was like the automobile industry's face.
In America, at least.
Yeah, in America.
And
well,
yeah,
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So, somebody once quoted that how they thought that the Watchmen panels in the comic book actually looked like the panels from the How Not to Do It in the How to Draw It the Marvel Way book.
Which is funny because Watchmen's a DC property.
Yeah. Anyway.
So, okay.
But the little comment that I was going to say is, and this is something that a few people have been noticing, is that it seems like the movie itself it had the energy plot line put into it, which is, we're going to save the world, we're going to help the world by bringing out free energy for everyone, and then they got the Chrysler guy, amongst others, there with the whole car industry thing.
Yeah, and the scary thing is that's actually very accurate as to how things work. Is as soon as the automobile industry feels that their livelihood might possibly be threatened by something, then that industry is shut down. And the reason we know this is the case is because there's a company that does alternative fuels. They create synthetic fuels for...
Sorry guys, having a bit of a family thing going on in the background at the moment.
Yeah, we'll keep talking.
Okay. So they create synthetic fuels for the airline industry. And when they were approached by a few people to say, well, why don't you do this for the automobile industry? They said, because we don't want to be shut down. Because the automobile industry would shut them down because they're creating synthetic fuels.
That's happened a lot of times. There was a guy, I can't think who it was, in Australia, who did much the same thing. He came up with this thing, and one of the it was basically a clean energy thing. He did it in about the 60s or so. He went to the car makers and he goes, this is going to be the best thing for you. Yeah, we'll take it. They paid him about something in the order, I think in those days, $7 million, and then £7 million, and then did nothing about it.
Yeah.
And when he asked about it, they said, well, we paid you because we didn't want it actually on the market.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then the way they did it, and this is a point which has been made, is there was a bit of point about the car market and all that, but it kind of felt more something today than something of the 80s.
Oh no, this has been going on for a while. It's just that with the improved communication.
Yeah, but the way it was approached in that feels more like, because it was an updated bit, it's something that's going to try and make it connecting more to today's age than, yeah.
Well, I don't know how it has been in Australia or England, but here in the States, it's always been known that the auto industry, or excuse me, suspected that the auto industry has been holding back progress in terms of energy development. I mean, heck, there's some comedy movies from the early 90s about how the auto industry executives were all getting together to conspire to keep certain developments about, low-cost energy, free energy, electric cars, things like that, out of the hands of the public. So this has been an ongoing concern for Americans for a very long time. So the inclusion of that as something that would happen in the 80s, to me, at the very least, is hardly surprising. I mean, I remember this discussion when I was a kid where, the news would come on and there would be some person who was being described as a crank talking about how, the auto companies are keeping us from being able to drive cheap cars and things like that.
Hang on a second, guys.
Yeah, I know what you're saying anyway, but yeah, I'm just making that little point.
Right. I'm going to pause. Okay. It looks like Killerfish, you're back, and
yep,
you're going to have to get going. So
I'm going to have to get going, I'm afraid. you know how it is. You're just like hiding in a shopping centre, and you know you've got zombies on your case, and you just need to go and deal with them. And,
Damn sushi bars.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to leave it. I'm just going to have to get my shotgun out and deal with the zombies. So I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. And
Good luck with the zombies.
no problem. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.
Alrighty. So, okay. The auto industry is, in America, at least, have long been suspected of all this kind of thing.
In Australia, like I was going to say, it's people sort of expect that, but they'll just pass it off as American auto industries trying to influence, other parts of the world, as they normally do.
Right. Oh, I mean, yeah, one could say it's the American way.
And if someone's going to make a point about, that's wrong, or that's anti-American, stuff like that, can I make the point that the biggest car companies in Australia, and have been for a while, are American-owned?
Indeed.
There's Holden, GM, and Ford.
Quite. Yes. Okay, so getting back to the Watchmen. One thing, talking of bringing in a modern audience, that I thought was really interesting and really a nice touch and very understated, and you really kind of had to be paying attention to see it. As the camera is panning across what is in, we'll call it ground zero of the New York devastation. You get a little glimpse of the New York skyline just beyond the construction that's going on. And you see standing there the Twin Towers. That's a nice touch. That's a beautiful little piece of cinematic artwork right there. I applaud you.
Well, the towers were built anyway, and would have been weird if they didn't actually have them in there.
Well, true, but I think it was in my opinion,
which is what a lot of things from that. I think it was one of the film was meant to be set in that era, or something. I'm not sure directly offhand, but I think they edited out the Twin Towers for that era.
No.
Or when they filmed it, they filmed along the area, and they forgot to put the Twin Towers in when they had a scene that was set in that era.
Oh, okay. So there was some other scene where. Gotcha. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was
not Watchmen, but something else.
Okay. I see what you're saying. But yeah, it was just a nice touch to see that and sort of say, yeah, we're kind of juxtaposing the two events there.
Well, another good one that did it would be Life on Mars, if you want a TV version. The American version of Life on Mars.
Life on Mars. Was that a sitcom? I don't watch that.
No, it's based off a British TV show. It's about a cop that gets hit by a car in 2008 or something.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah.
I never watched it. So
It's the American version's been cancelled because apparently they were feeling that they were going to run out of ideas for it, even though it was rating well.
Yeah. Well,
shame.
Sometimes, as like with the Watchmen, if you come to the end of your story and you've got no more story to tell, there's no point in dragging it on and beating a dead horse.
Well, yeah, that's one good things I like about what they're doing with Battlestar. The difference is that they did that with Life on Mars in the first series.
You mean first season?
Yeah, first season of the show.
I never watched it, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, in any case, the juxtaposition of the Twin Towers in that scene kind of made me think of. I actually read the book before the September 11th attacks in 2001, which at the time there's a reason that I'm thinking that this idea would never work. I can't quite place my finger on it, but for the world's supposedly smartest man, this is a really stupid idea, and I can't formulate why. Well, having had a massive attack that took out 3,000 plus lies and created a big crater in the middle of New York City, and a few other attempted attacks on a couple other locations, I can tell you why it would not have worked, because it didn't work. We had a big, real, honest-to-goodness threat that decided to take out large numbers of lives and get the entire world's attention. And all of a sudden, everybody's focused on this. And for a tiny little brief time, everybody was all, we're united, we're standing behind you, we're with you 100%. And then it didn't even take a month for that to all start breaking down. It's,
yeah, in the long run, it's the weak big, but it kind of was the point they did show with Nixon, which one thing you go on with the point about they didn't show as well with the stuff from the minor characters. Nixon was one I would have really have liked to have seen more of, because they're going on how he's morally ambiguous. They didn't give you enough detail when they showed him to really make to draw a conclusion about him.
Yeah, I mean, you could see him as one way or the other, I suppose, but it's the way they showed him. It was like, well, yeah, he's doing his job as president. I don't see why he would be morally ambiguous in this film.
Yeah, but the only way you could conceive it to be, he's morally ambiguous is, what's the popular image of Nixon? I wonder.
Yeah, and that just to let everybody know, in that universe, Nixon was not caught for the Watergate scandal because, what's their names? Something in Bernstein. The original reporters who broke the Watergate scandal were found dead in a hotel parking lot before they could break the Watergate scandal. So
either because of one of the masked, or Dr. Manhattan. I've heard points either way.
Yeah. So basically, somebody probably working for Nixon took out the two reporters before they could break the story about Watergate, which kept Nixon in office long enough to get Dr. Manhattan in Vietnam.
You know what? That would have been a good thing to have added in. Well, no, the Watergate happened after 1970, which is where Watergate finished. But my point, what I was about to say is you're saying about what happened with Watergate. That would have been a great bit to have added into the intro scene, or the opening credits of Watchmen.
That would have been. Oh, and let's talk about the opening credits a little bit.
That's the best damn bit of the movie.
Oh, you are not kidding. I told my wife, you don't want to see this movie, but you have to see these opening credits. Because to describe as best I can without actually showing it, imagine the flash of a picture, but slowed down so that the flash lighting up takes as long as it takes for a normal movie fade in. And then you see what's happening with the scene, and then the flash dimming in your view is the length of time of a normal movie fade out. But they're showing in that incredibly slowed down time exactly what's going on in the scene, including...
Yeah, it's more of a length of time of a photo flash.
Exactly. And
yeah,
it's gorgeously rendered, and it perfectly captures the history of this alternate universe in the space of
5 minutes.
Yeah, it's so well done, and I think it's going to be one of those key scenes that, as people are studying film history, they're going to say, that's how you do it.
It's a lot of things really made it work. The CGI in it, the way they had the elements, heck, even one bit that was a bit subtle, and it's something which what's he called? Zach? What's his last name? The director.
Oh, I don't know the director's name. Sorry.
Or whatever his name is. The element was about when they showed the superheroes at the original Silk Spectre's retirement. They had them all around the table, and it was a Last Supper type look.
Oh yeah. I remember seeing that and thinking, nice touch.
Although when I looked at that, I'm going, they're just taking off the Battlestar image.
I didn't see that.
I'll show you that later, but basically Battlestar for season 4 did a very similar look. But then again, he's done Jesus-like images before. Example, King Leonidas in 300, when he was killed in the end, he does the crucified Jesus figure.
Uh-huh.
Although apparently Troy, being an atheist, didn't pick it up, and when I told it, I went, "That's the Jesus figure." He went, "Oh, you would get that because you believe in Christ."
Oh, jeez.
Come on, it's an old image.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. Anyway, moving on. So.
Oh, one little bit about the opening. I remembered. The company that did it, they released it freely online.
Oh, did they? Okay, so
Yes.
go find it. In fact, if Squato, if you
No,
haven't...
you can't, because it's been taken off the net.
Oh, sucks. I'm sure somebody's...
Well, it was a few bits on YouTube, and you'd probably be able to find it on torrents, maybe. But the comment for why it was taken down is that, and I love this little remark from them, was that, well, we had it on there, but apparently it was taken down because Warner Brothers didn't want to have it on there. Warner Brothers took it down because the idea of free advertising is a bad thing for them.
Yeah.
And as someone that has had run-ins with Warner Brothers, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
Saying that because one of my videos, because I make the music videos for EGS, one of mine got pulled.
Yeah. So, which is one reason why I'm really, really avoiding using mainstream music that is represented by any label in the podcast. Squato.
This is fan work. And we use segments.
Well, no, I understand what you're saying, but I'm talking about the music. I don't want a podcast episode to have to be pulled entirely because we decided to use some music that was not fan work. In any case, so overall impressions of the movie, it was violent, it was gory, it was bloody, and the ending is dark and depressing, and most people... If you go in expecting a Spider-Man or a Batman, you are going to be sorely disappointed. It's not that kind of movie.
Which is what was happening when I went to see it, because I got to see it on... And a lot of people were like, oh, it's such a great movie. It was all fun and everyone was all interested in it. The people saying that generally saw the midnight version. I saw it at 2 o'clock on a Saturday. There was families there with their kids. And it's like, and when it came up to the rape scene, it's like, Mommy! And it's, I actually went with my mother, because she was interested in seeing the movie itself, and she had some things to say about it. She's like, yeah, this one's going to be it's going to be changing the perception of what superhero type films would be overall, but someone taking a film which is taking kids to an MA-15 plus film, what were they thinking?
Yeah, it's one of those things where, okay, you get your parent license taken away. You don't get to be a parent anymore.
Yeah. Well, the gore level is even more than Batman. The Dark Knight.
Yeah, the gore in the Dark Knight was not even close. This. You don't normally see somebody's arms getting cut off.
Or you don't see someone basically explode, and on hanging from the roof would be what's left of their the bones of their arm swinging.
Yeah. So yeah,
Thank you, Dr. Manhattan.
It's not a movie for kids. The rating system here in the States is such that there's people who are saying it should have been instead of rated R, NC-17, which, even though it shouldn't be considered to be worse than rated R, it is considered to be worse than rated R, because there are people who will still take their kids to a rated R movie that the instant they hear it's NC-17 will be, that should never be in theaters. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. Because technically rated R is supposed to be 18 and over, whereas NC-17 is 17 and over. but NC-17
Yeah.
has somehow gotten the
It's the worst perception.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, in Australia, we just basically have highest one that's allowed for general would be MA 15 plus is basically you really don't want to take kids underneath that into that. If you really want to push it, maybe 12, 13. That is kids that would be able to largely understand what the themes that are going on there and how someone basically exploding someone and using their thoughts is not a good idea for them to be doing.
Yeah.
Not taking a 4-year-old kid into a film like that.
Yeah. Ugh, stupid. Okay, so
Although it's funny.
now all that said about how gory and bloody and all that is, it's still really, really good. It's very loyal to the book, which was again, the book itself is considered to be like a groundbreaking work for the comic book medium. It's considered to be an American classic at this point, and is considered to be unparalleled before and since. And the movie, as far as the movie industry goes, is not going to do that. But as far as comic book movies, I agree with your mother. It's going to completely change the entire comic book movie spectrum. People are not now going to say, "Oh, let's go see the Fantastic Four. They're going to save the world and give everybody candy." It's going to be,
Yeah.
Is this going to be another Watchmen?
Well, apparently, it's apparently because of that Fox Studios is now saying that they're going to recast basically everyone in the Fantastic Four, or if they do a next one, basically going to reboot the entire series.
Fantastic, or Fox. Don't get me started on Fox. It's like I don't care what they do with their news franchise, but their entertainment franchise is just that they need to be individually clubbed until they are not stupid anymore.
Well, they've always had some fun.
Yeah.
The 2001 TV series is a good example I'd like to give off.
2001 TV series?
Well, the TV season, I should say, where they made all the TV shows that were going to be aired during that time.
Right. I don't remember what. Keep in mind that I was a lot closer to what happened in 2001 than you were. What are you talking about?
2001 for them, that was when Fox had decided to commission a TV series which to some people is probably one of the best TV series ever made, and that was Firefly.
That was 2001?
Yeah. Well, it was aired in the US. That was the season it was done in the US.
I thought that was like 2003. Now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
yeah.
It's also there was a no, that was UPN. But I think some of the same executives that worked at Fox also worked at UPN during its run.
Section.
Yeah.
They also had there was other things they did. For instance, they did cancel some good shows at the time. For instance, Dark Angel was one that got cancelled. They also, because they cancelled it to bring the money forward for Firefly. They also were commissioning other TV shows, which they cancelled. For one, there was going to be a remake of Battlestar Galactica, very different to what was made. That was cancelled, so they did that. They also had a few other TV shows. One was a remake of The Time Tunnel, possibly a remake of Quantum Leap, amongst other things.
Yep.
Yeah, they had all these shows they were commissioning and they're making money for, and they went, no, we're going to cancel them all and focus entirely on Firefly. And then they cancelled it straight away. Them smart.
I are smart.
Yeah. I reckon Futurama got the perfect joke with that. The directors from the Box Network. It's in the first movie where they got the directors there. One was going da 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 da, and the other one slams a phone on his head.
Yes, yeah. It's Fox is really stupid. Moving on. By the way, one more thing about Fox, and I do apologize for stretching this out, but for those of you who may not know, Warner Brothers is the company that actually made the Watchmen movie. They bought the rights, they developed it, all this kind of good stuff. Well, when Watchmen was, I think, 3 months away from being released, Fox...
About 6, actually.
6 months? Okay. So Fox decides that since they, once upon a time, a long time ago in the late 80s, had, at that point...
Well, actually, they had it from about, like you said, late 80s and right up until about 2004. The idea was sort of touted around, and then when this version was being made, they had the option of either helping to fund it. They said, no, we're going to decide, we're saying no at this point. And apparently when they saw the script, the actual statement from them, I'm going to edit it somewhat, but they referred to it as one of the most stupidest beeping scripts that's ever been produced in Hollywood's history.
Uh-huh. So keep that in mind.
They weren't interested.
Yeah, keep that in mind when I tell you that they came along 6 months to the release of the movie after everybody and their mother was saying, oh, this looks really good, and said, we want a piece of the action. We didn't do anything. We sat on it. We were going to try and bury it, but we want money. Give us money. Give me money now! So, yeah.
One little point about that, I know some people were reacting like, oh, it's such a bad thing, they shouldn't have won that case. They won it. So I know some people are unhappy about that. Remember the fact that they did win it, so there kind of is an argument.
They didn't.
Yes. No, they did.
No, they didn't.
No, Fox won it.
Warner Brothers settled. Fox didn't
No,
win.
it was won.
No, they didn't.
It was.
Warner Brothers settled.
The judge ruled that it was Fox was in the right. Then it was a settle because instead of actually going to fight it, they went, well, screw it, we'll just settle.
Yeah, but the thing is that Warner Brothers had a much better case than the original judge gave them credit for, and they could have fought it, and they would have won. Every single legal analyst that was looking at the case is saying Warner Brothers did not have to pay Fox, but Warner Brothers, and I understand Warner Brothers on this. They had a movie. It was coming out in 6 months. If they had delayed the release of the movie, they would have lost all the momentum that had gathered. That it would have not turned into as big a success as it could have been. So they needed to get it out the door. I understand Time Warner's position. What I'm saying is that Fox, Johnny Come Lately, who would have been Johnny Come Never if they had just gone with their usual tactics and just ignored anything that they thought was stupid that everybody else was saying, oh, this is good. They decided to create this stink and get a piece of the action that they never earned or deserved. That's what pisses people off.
They did have a part in the history of it at the very least, so that should be recognised.
They had a part in trying to bury it.
Yeah. But one point going with what you said with Warner Brothers, there's a point that's come up a bit too recently, which is that one of the games that Warner Brothers had money invested in being produced, this is a little point about the ratings board in Australia, and technically speaking this could be worth an entire discussion onto itself, just the way the system works in Australia. But their game got banned. I'm not exactly sure which game it was and for what reasons. But the general agreement is it was not the stronger case for the banning as what the review board said. So Warner Brothers has said we're going to fight it, and yeah, they will.
Good. Well, I mean, in that case, there's not this huge time constraint to get it out the door like now, which was the big problem.
Yeah.
Like I said, I understand Warner Brothers' stance on the whole thing. I just wish it hadn't been necessary. Okay, so we are now, it's time for us to start closing up.
I just wanted to make a few points. I know you're saying how great it is. Me, and as you said before, the movie was a bit... look, the story, I'm not sure. There's things about the story I'm just a bit... really unsure about. No, it just feels a bit stupid. You made your point. For me, I really felt that the middle part of the story, like when Rorschach was lying around, the sort of, how can I put it? Yeah, from at least the funeral scene right up until they freed Rorschach, that kind of got boring in the movie.
Well,
and it was dumb.
Yeah, you're also the one who's of the opinion that the entire plot was a MacGuffin. So,
well, I view it as more of a character-focused story than a plot story, because it was just the MacGuffin is the whole thing is we find as we'll save the world, and the way it came about in the end. And I'm not the only one that agrees with that. Alan Moore has described it as a MacGuffin plot. So that's one of the main reasons why I'm focusing on that. But there's some of the things that just felt a bit like that middle part that's really, really dumb. Especially with the so-called relationship between Night Owl and Silk Spectre. It's just like, oh, look, they've not seen each other for years. They apparently didn't really talk too much. Oh, look, and they're turning into, they're doing it more than bunnies do.
Yes.
It's just like, what?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. That's another reason. Don't take your kids to this movie.
Yeah. A lot of sex. And that sex was actually felt worse than some of the cheap porns out there.
Yeah. Well, there's probably a reason for that. The cheap porn.
Yeah.
They're actually having sex.
This one, it just felt dumb. And Mad Magazine. This is why I made the point beforehand. They do a good rip-off of the story and the comic and the rest of it in general. They really rip off that point of, and even Night Owl, the guy who plays Night Owl, says, "Wait, we've just met each other," and she comes out with this, and the way they basically make fun of her is that there's a term to describe Silk Spectre, and that starts with a W. The word "or" isn't part of it, and there's a H in the middle. Oh, and they also do kind of make one little implication, that is that Night Owl, the only way that he can have sex, because he can't do it normally, the only way he can do it is when he wears his costume. Yes, Night Owl is a furry.
That's one way to look at it. Okay.
There was one last little point. The next page on that, they do talk about.
This is your last point. Okay.
Yeah. They do make fun of how the so-called all the deeper meanings and all the elements and all this all come together, and that's the prison riot scene, where they have the murders about to take place, and that is the guys that are going to conduct it. They get caught up in trying to work out the deeper meaning of it. For instance, how there's a guy that's an owl, and how the deeper meaning behind the owls, how owls are all over the place. They're nocturnal creatures. They live only in the darkness and all this type of thing, and how the only place in the world where you cannot find any owl, or where owls don't live, is apparently in Antarctica, which has a deeper meaning itself into the rest of the story. And then there's also the elements of Osiris and all that type of stuff, but how does that really relate into the story of all this? They become so focused in trying to bring in their little deeper, the deeper mythology into their story, and then they die. It actually is a pretty good one, though.
Okay, well, I'll take your word for it. So, we do have one question from the Slug Car, I think. Do you prefer the grayscale, black and white, or color comic style? Referring to, of course, El Gunashev. I don't care.
I'm not sure what Bob the Destroyer might have to say about that. But yeah, I know what you're saying, how you don't care. Me, one bit, it either is fine, but what the hell are you doing? Sorry, my cat's in my room and she's deciding to investigate my bed by walking all over it. Okay. When it comes to the comic itself, it's okay either way, but the problem I really have was when it came to video making, and that was, for years, it's pretty much been black and white -- grayscale, whichever you prefer. That was fine. In fact, that was pretty good to work with. Then it went color, and that became an issue because some of the things, if you're trying to relate in elements from the older comics with the newer stuff, it was harder because you either had to grayscale them all, or you had to color all grayscale the new stuff, or black and white. colorize the older stuff, and the kind of and that element, it didn't really work. And then when it comes back to grayscale and that, for me it's much better video wise because it can be much clearer and it's concise. It also works more visually if it's black and white than if it's color. I know some people don't agree with me on that point, but when it comes to the videos point, but really it's a better one to work with, and it can also be more with black and white, much more easier in what you're trying to relate into the videos trying to visually show, since black and white is more going to Rorschach's point of view, one or the other. So you can be more to the point in what you're trying to show.
Well, again, I just don't care. As long as the story is getting told and regular comic updates are being released, you can release in color, black and white, or grayscale. I'm not picky at all.
Yeah, but my point being is it's really annoying if you're wanting to play around with some of the elements like that.
So if you want to do derivative works, then it's an issue. But if you don't care...
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have a webcomic review, and unfortunately we had...
Because no one had caught up with the comic, apparently.
Yeah. And unfortunately Killerfish had to duck out, so we're just going to close this off. Just a quick note, by the time you will have heard this, the Order of the Bunny website will have been open for 2 weeks by the time you hear this. So if you haven't seen it by now, go check it out at web.me.com/homernet/OOTB, and I will put a link to that in the show notes. So Killerfish, you're in any big projects that we should expect to see in the next couple weeks? I'll take that as a no. Okay, let's...
He's not even here. That's just sort of just doing a fish out in the air with sound.
Squato, how about yourself?
Projects I cannot talk about.
Okay. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and sign out. Say goodbye, Killerfish. Nothing? Okay. Say goodbye, Squato.
Sometimes I feel like I'm controlled
Hello.
like a hero in a comic book. Chasing one day after the next. No settle down, no easy text, baby. But it makes me feel alive when you're here by my side. You complete the two of us, you make the rules apply. It's a crazy world. In a twisted turn of reality, it's you and me. And I need you here to keep some sanity. We are but pawns in a faded game of cat and mouse. Maybe a couple of headshots thrown out here and there. This crazy world is all messed up, all in my hair. I've got you, I don't care. But now all that I want is just to be your man. It's a crazy world. In a twisted turn of reality, it's you and me. And I need you here to keep some sanity. We are but pawns in a faded game of cat and mouse. Maybe a couple of guinea pigs thrown out here and there. This crazy world is all messed up in my head. I got you, I don't care.